This is the word of the Lord.
Who's the person in your circle of proximity that you're most likely to name drop in a conversation? Who's the person that you think will impress others that you know? I like to tell the story of flipping through an old photo album when I was travelling with my father in America. We were at a cousin of his in Palo Alto, and I was looking through this photo album with photos of the family, and there was a photo of this character that looked just like Albert Einstein. You know, that very distinctive hair. And so I said, Dad, look at this guy. It looks just like Albert Einstein. And Dad says, that is Albert Einstein. And I go, what? And apparently, many in the German Jewish community were involved in helping each other escape from Germany, and some of my extended family were in some way related to helping Einstein get into America. Does that story pique your interest? Am I a slightly more interesting person now as a result of my proximity to Einstein? Jesus told stories in a way that conveyed truth more effectively than any true story could. Jesus seemed to understand that it's by use of stories that we make sense of our lives, because stories provide context for us. They locate us in a world where there are actors doing stuff in circumstances that we can relate to. And the ongoing distillation of the meaning of stories continues the process of forming the frontal lobe of our brains well into our 20s. That's a long time to be developing our brains, right? And it's the stories that are working in us to develop our brains, to help us assess what's good, what's true, what's right, what's helpful, all these sorts of things. Both the stories of our own personal experience that we try to make sense of, and the stories that shape our community and culture. These are the raw materials from which we draw meaning and form conclusions about what is most important in life. And equally, how we work out where we fit in this whole thing and how we are to be known. Because once upon a time, we were born into a tribe, or perhaps a class, or maybe a station in life that told us our place. We were told who we were as a person. If my father was a farmer or a factory worker, I would most likely follow in his footsteps. But today we're excitedly informed that the world is our oyster. We can do whatever we want to do and be what we want to be. And this might be progress, yet we seem to be offered so little guidance on the matter of how do we work out what to want? Because by default, most of us want whatever most other people mostly want. And that is to say, we tend to follow each other. It's a little bit vacuous. Whatever's trending, whatever's popular, whatever's going viral, wherever the most eyeballs are at the moment, interest creates interest. You know, I'm so naive. I've been reading a book recently, and in it I learned that the publishing industry names books as bestsellers as a strategy to increase their sales. I know. Most of you knew that already, but I didn't, because publishers know that if people believe a book is popular, customers are more likely to buy it. They'll assume it's worth buying. We have celebrities who are famous merely for being famous. They don't do anything else, they're just famous, and so they're famous, and so they're famous. We're drawn to where others are drawn, and the latest fads have no innate worthiness in themselves, because otherwise flares would still be a thing. Right? And they're not. Just letting you know, Trev, in case you're wondering. No dispersions there, sorry. The fact is, we are drawn to wherever others are drawn. And this is the deception of the prince of the power of the air. It's not about substance, it's about the herd mentality. It's merely the persuasive force of the herd, all moving in one direction. And as a consequence, there is advantages in associating ourselves with the more famous, the more powerful, the more influential, those who are in the centre of things. We draw some fame for ourselves, some power for ourselves, some influence perhaps, or some sense of being closer to the centre from our proximity to such people. We don't need to do anything to make us worthy as such. We're kind of just using their fame and power, etc., by our proximity to it. Now, it should be noted that Jesus here really is addressing the concern of what others might think, how it looks in the eyes of others. What are people attracted to, as it were? Because why would we take the seat of honour in the first place? And it's because we want to be honoured by others in their eyes. And how does Jesus address this matter? He says, beware, this might backfire for you in the eyes of others. Jesus offers the thought experiment. Imagine which you would prefer. Is it preferable to be elevated in the sight of all the guests, or to be publicly sent down to the seats of less honour in front of everybody? For the most part, most of us get on with life approximately according to the social conventions of our day. We absorb the rules of engagement. A kind of interpersonal osmosis happens where we pick up what you're supposed to do in this context or that context. We have highly attuned antennae that pick up little micro cues about what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. We automatically store up the useful strategies and steer away from things that we know would be useful to avoid. I remember when I first came to Mustard Seed, I remember standing about where Mal is now and watching what happened in this peculiar place. Because it was quite different to Manly. Manly was a beachside suburb, is a beachside suburb, and people came to church in bare feet and shorts, and it was just very laissez-faire. And I needed to work out how things were done here. Not that I was unwilling to alter the status quo, but I wanted to be aware of when I might be bumping into the expectations of people and be wise about where to suggest change. How was this service structured? What kinds of ideas are welcomed in this place? Who might give me a sympathetic hearing? And is there anyone I should be wary of? I'm not going to tell you how I answered any of those questions. I will tell you, though, that my social antennae was highly sensitised. I was detecting and analysing all kinds of micro cues in the relations and interactions that went on because I felt like an outsider. And I was keen to have the insight of an insider. Because when we enter the world, any of our worlds in a sense, the rules pre-exist us. They're there before we get there. We don't make them up. And we may not be entirely happy with the way they work, the way the system functions, but we exercise a kind of pragmatic wisdom to help us get to where we want to within that context. However, this is where choice does come into play. To where is it that we want to get? Whose society are we most interested in navigating? Every society, every culture has its own particular ways and rules. When Joe and I travelled through Asia, we encountered a number of things that were quite unexpected. In a group in Thailand where we were visiting a friend of mine who was working in the slums, and it had a bunch of young people who were living in the slum, and they were meeting for Bible studies and stuff, and they sat on the floor. And so one time I was walking past someone and I just touched them on the head. Do not touch someone on the head in Thailand. It's disrespectful. It's a sign of dominance over them. I didn't know that. It was a sign of affection for me. We were travelling, I think it was still in Thailand, and somehow, somewhere, somebody pointed a foot at someone. Like, it's over there, you do that kind of thing. You've got your hands full. Never point your foot at something. in that culture. It's completely disrespectful. Cultures have their ways and rules, the things that are important and the stuff to be avoided, and each one is different. Which culture will we concern ourselves with? How do we decide what to prioritise? And more profoundly still than navigating our way through culture, we actually want to be known and loved too, don't we? Not for playing a role and meeting expectations, but for who we really are. I have a number of friends who are past the age of the initial matching up kind of process in life, where you might meet someone at university or whatnot, but are kind of in the next phase. Maybe they've had long-term relationships and they've not lasted, or people have moved on or died or something. And the thing to do today, apparently, is to look for a partner using an app or a internet platform of some kind. It seems to be far more challenging than the days 30 years ago when you just bumped into someone and said, "Oh, you want a drink?" It's not that easy these days, I think. And from what I hear about these sites, older people tend to misrepresent their age, sometimes by as much as 10 years. They'll say they're younger because they want to attract a younger person. They'll exaggerate their assets, that they are wealthier than they actually are. Images are tampered with, or they use ones from many years ago that make them look more desirable, this kind of thing. And one of my friends commented, she said, do these people think they're not going to be found out? I mean, the first face-to-face meeting will dispel the deception of an old photo or a kind of manipulated photo. Truth regarding a person's age tends to come out in the first couple of conversations because you just know different stuff in different decades. People who deceptively inflate what they see as their desirable qualities set themselves up to be an ongoing disappointment to whoever they are relating to. The more fully they become known for who they actually are, the larger the credibility gap between who they turn out to be and who they represented themselves as. Those who humbly offer the truth about who they are likely to get less interest from others. It's just the way it seems to work. But the interest they do get is based on the reality of who they are and not a fiction. And getting to know a humble and honest person offers more opportunity for delightful surprise. Expectations will be closer to the reality, and then there's an opportunity for them to even be surpassed, which is always a nice thing. Getting to know a person who's misrepresented themselves by giving an inflated impression is a pathway to perpetual disappointment, I would put it to you. They never live up to the advertising. And in the end, we actually want to be known and loved, not for pretending to be something, but for who we actually are. As I say, we're very adept at gauging expectations. Then it's natural to seek to want to meet those expectations. And we know the world's way of seeing is basically, what's in it for me? And people are looking at me and thinking, what's in Dave for me? And I'm naturally looking around and going, where's the value for me? That's the world's kind of culture. When we host an event, who do we enjoy sharing our time and hospitality with? Generally, it's the people who we think like us and who are like us, with whom we're interested in cultivating relationships, and we know there'll be a good to and fro, a giving and receiving. We may be offering our hospitality, but there is a subtle exchange taking place. We're building our credibility with a group or our standing in that particular society. But what about the groups that nobody wants to join? The poor, the cripple, the lame, the blind. These people are not easy for us to want to be with because they're not just like us. We do not desire to be just like them. There is no quid pro quo, no transactional benefit to be found by cultivating these people. In Jesus' day, in fact, they were viewed as a burden. They had to be looked after. There were scarce resources, and some of them had to be spent on people that weren't going to generate more. Something quite different happens when we give to those who we see as having nothing worth exchanging. The assumptions built into our transactional culture get profoundly disrupted. A remarkable shift took place when I stopped trying to be a good minister when I was visiting Juliet. Juliet was a homeless person in the streets around here. Most of you know of her, but some of you more recently come. She's now in a nursing home. She was first in the Blue Mountains. She's now at St Ives. And I used to go and visit her when she went into the nursing home. I was trying to be a good minister. I thought that's what ministers ought to do, and they should, and I was being a good minister. But when I began to take a genuine interest in her as a unique person, things really did shift, because Juliet had developed a very sophisticated set of skills to get what she wanted from well-meaning people who wanted to do the right thing. She knew how to squeeze the most out of them. It was a very clever survival technique. But those techniques failed when I stopped wanting to help her. I didn't want to help her anymore. I wanted to get to know her. And immediately, I began to enjoy my time with her much more, and so did she. She no longer felt like a project. She felt like a person, and she began to allow me to see her for who she actually is. And there was a richness, there is a richness there that continues to get deeper because everybody's got such a big backstory. I mean, I could tell you things about Juliet that would both make your hair stand on end and fill you with admiration. She's remarkable. Rather than getting something for ourselves, we instead simply engage the person because they are a person. To anyone who's looking for something for themselves, they'll be disappointed. These are people who have things that nobody wants. Who wants poverty? Who wants to be ill or lame or blind? But there is something much greater to be discovered, because every person, no matter what size or shape or colour or ethnicity or health status or age or education or economic level or religion or class or vocation or capacity or even their faithfulness, we all are made in the image of God. And if we look long and hard enough at any person, no matter how far they might have strayed from reflecting the glory of the one whose image we are all made, we can still discover more of the nature of God. See, all world cultures are built on the dynamic of exchange. There's something we offer to secure something we want. And the kingdom of God is fundamentally different. There's nothing we need to give. It's a grace kingdom. In fact, there's nothing we can give. It has been offered to us freely by the grace of God. All we can do is choose the kingdom. And that choice requires a forsaking of the exchange culture of the world. Not that we stop engaging in interactions of exchange, because we'd have to leave the world altogether to do that, but something far more subtle and important has to change. We no longer see ourselves or other people on the basis of our interactions of exchange. We are not what we have accumulated or achieved. We are not our skill set nor our qualifications. We are first and foremost a child of God. And entering the kingdom is not merely a one-off decision of choosing this way over that way. It's the ongoing call to see everything and everyone in a completely new way. And rather than seeing in terms of what we can get, or worse still, what is the threat, we see all people as God's image bearers. We recognise every circumstance as an opportunity to further realise the presence of God in our midst. And the deepest mystery of all is God is present in the most unlikely of situations. And God's image is seen so clearly in the most unlikely of people. Not when we're looking for something to get from others, but when we realise we are all fearfully and wonderfully made. In truth, I think the deepest challenge is to believe we ourselves, with all our foibles and our compromise, are made in the image of God. That we are known, loved, accepted by our God. Because when that's the place from which we live, we have no need for so-called seats of honour. Every seat upon which we sit becomes a seat of honour if we are honourable people. Every person can become an honoured guest if we as host honour them. It's not about the life we draw from others, it is the life we offer to others. It is the way we live most fully into the creative wonder of the nature of the God in whose image we are made. That image is nowhere seen more clearly than in the Son of God, Jesus Christ, the one who we are going to celebrate as we break bread around his table in just a moment.